Ladies and gentlemen, you are watching Pakistan's premier football show. This is Pressing Matters brought to you by On the Mic. And today we are bringing you an exclusive interview with none other than the chairman of the Pakistan Football Federation Normalisation Committee, Mr. Haroon Malik. It is an absolute pleasure, sir. Thank you so much for taking out the time. I know you're a busy man. How are you doing these days?
Assalamu alaikum, Ismail, and assalamu alaikum to your audience. Thank you for having me on the show. Busy is football. So anything football, I'm always up for. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, sir. Big fan of the work that you and the Normalization Committee were doing, and it's a pleasure to be able to talk to you. Unfortunately, circumstances aisi hain ke we have to obviously talk about stuff that's not so great. But in the end, I think it's very important that we have this chat for ourselves, for the audience, for football in Pakistan as a whole. So let's just get straight to it because I know everybody. There's an elephant in the room. 27th March, the day of the Pakistan Football Federation headquarters takeover. Can you please walk us through the events that happened as you were there?
Okay. And this is interesting. So it all started, I guess, sometime before. And on the 26th, which was Friday evening, apparently there was a meeting of these people in Islamabad where they passed certain resolutions or what have you. On the 27th, which was a Saturday, I was in the office. I had meetings in the morning and I was doing some work for football. And so around, I believe, 2:30, 3 p.m., there was this huge commotion and a lot of people just barged into my room and I kind of said, what's going on? And they're like, we have demands and you need to leave and hand over. And I said, okay, saans anything, give me a minute. Let's talk about this like reasonable people. To which obviously the response was the time for talk has gone. So I'm just shortening everything. It was very, so then I tried to understand what they were saying. And I tried to explain to them the consequences of what they were doing. They understood the consequences and I think they were fine with it, or at least that's what they said.
That's a very important point, yes. Repeatedly, they said, we know what we're doing.
Yeah, and they repeatedly said, we don't care about being banned by FIFA, which is unfortunate. And then their primary focus was to hand over the charge and to hand over the accounts. To which, of course, I said, we're not going to hand over charge. This is not how things are done. You are not a recognized body. Eventually, when the decibel level started to rise and it became angry voices and there were a lot of people there, I was very scared because of my own personal safety. So I asked my staff to leave and they blocked the staff from leaving. Then I asked my staff, okay, I'm going to walk out, let's all leave together. So then as we started walking out, they physically restrained some of our staff members. And then I eventually managed to escape. So they had padlocked the doors from the inside. And one of the glass doors, I managed to break and escape from there. And then that's how I exited the building. What is interesting is that our director administration of the time, he was completely involved with these people. And he's the one that facilitated their entry and kept them apprised that even though it's a Saturday, the chairman is here and now he's alone and there's only 2 or 3 staff members, so come on in. And quite unfortunate, but that's what happened on the 27th. Uske baad we sent, my primary concerns were 2 at the time. One was to get the staff out and one was the National Women's Championship that was happening. So we sent our lawyer, he was able to get the staff out of the building. And then after that, we were just thankful that everybody's fine. And then later in the evening, we had to cancel the National Women's Championship because obviously safety and security of everybody is the primary concern.
Yeah.
A bit traumatic. I don't like talking about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm really grateful that you covered these events and went through them. I'm sure it was very difficult for everyone that was there. So what did you do in the immediate days following the takeover? Because obviously there must be an element of shock. But at the same time, you had the responsibility and the leadership role, which meant that you had to, steer the ship, which I'm sure was a sort of a burden on you as well. But so, what did you do? Was there an attempt at negotiations?
Yeah. So the first thing obviously was ensuring safety for everyone, and that's primary. Beyond that, I think it was trying to have a conversation, not just with the folks, but also with others that were in positions of power. And we tried to explain to them what the situation was. That's on one side. On the other side, it was conversing with FIFA and informing them and updating them on what had happened. And they've constantly been asking for information ever since, and we've been providing that. The FIFA said that there's going to be a deadline set for asking these people to evict. Otherwise, it will go into suspension. And so that deadline came and went, and we all know what happened. Pakistan is suspended. And now the conversation is that Pakistan will be banned for 5 years. And so that's an almost constant conversation from our side that no, we're talking to people, we have hope. We're trying to push it as much as we can. But of course, if you look at global events, Pakistan stands nowhere. So rather than having a constant source of aggravation, I think FIFA would rather not. And so that's kind of where we're stuck today. And things don't seem to be progressing on the domestic front.
Right. So, what exactly were those? What exactly are those communications with FIFA like right now? Is there sort of just an idea from FIFA कि अभी जब वो छोड़ेंगे तभी आगे कोई बात बन सकती है, या is there a way to sort of ask the Ashfaq group to leave the premises? What's currently happening right now? Are there any communication channels ongoing?
So that question is in two parts. One is more about FIFA, and then one is about what is happening domestically. So let me try and answer both. What is happening with FIFA is उन्होंने एक बहुत clear mechanism provide किया है of what comes next. That mechanism is that the building needs to be vacated unconditionally, and NC needs to take over all affairs again. And so that's the statement, and FIFA will stick to that. How FIFA works is that FIFA has something called the FIFA Bureau. That's their highest decision-making body. The FIFA Bureau has made this decision, so there's no one in FIFA can now refute that or say anything else about it. This is just, it's common business practice for FIFA. So that's what FIFA has done. As far as FIFA in Pakistan, well, the Normalisation Committee is the representative for FIFA in Pakistan. So for all practical intents and purposes, we are FIFA. And then also by virtue of being the FIFA appointed chairman of the Normalisation Committee, I am also the president of Pakistan Football Federation. And there's only one Pakistan Football
Exactly.
Federation.
So sorry to cut you off, but there's, just to clear it up for everyone else, there is a sort of a deliberate confusion within the domestic chat about football, where they're talking about the people who have taken over PFF as PFF, and they're talking about the Normalisation Committee as the Normalisation Committee. Even our sports board president Fahmida Mirza has used this jargon. So just want to clear it for everyone. The Normalisation Committee is PFF. There is no other PFF that holds legitimacy in Pakistan.
And it's the only recognized body, and this is not just internationally and by FIFA and by the AFC, but it is also domestically as per the laws of the country. So,
Sorry, sir. So domestically, as the laws of the countries, isn't their whole idea of legitimacy that they won the elections that were held by the Supreme Court of Pakistan? So can you sort of reconcile the 2 points?
Yeah, so they claim, and they did, but those elections were never recognized by FIFA, and I'll come to that in a minute.
Okay.
But even let's say domestically, they say, yes, we are. There is no mandate or term assigned to them, so they keep repeating 2022, but that's not part of the decision. The second, in the Supreme Court decision, it is very clear that the Supreme Court directed that for any further matters, you will go to your regulatory body, which is the FIFA.
Yeah.
The third important element in there is that the Pakistan Football Federation statutes, what we in generic terms call the Constitution, clearly says that if the executive committee has not met for a period of 12 months, it stands dissolved. So they say they're the executive committee. They met in September 2019, and then they met in March 2021. That's more than 12 months. They stand dissolved by their own accord. And number four, in September 2019, when they met, they willingly uh, and through resolution handed over charge to FIFA and resigned from their positions. And so you don't just change your mind 16, 18 months later and say, no, we changed our mind, we don't resign. And then, it just doesn't work that way. So in no way is this body recognized or legal internationally or locally. So yeah, very interesting.
So, just on the last thing that we were talking about before this, what is the situation now domestically, communication channels with them?
So domestically, we've been trying to have conversations through multiple channels ever since the start. I think I should appreciate the efforts of Dr. Famida Mirza in coming out and giving a statement condemning the act. I must also point out that some of those statements in there were not entirely accurate, that there's two parties and one is the NC and one is the PFF, which we already spoke about. So that's one channel or avenue that is still open and we're talking about it. But here's where things kind of get interesting. I guess the question is, what is that conversation and what are these people asking for? That's really what it boils down to. So there's a few different things that I keep hearing, either from the other side directly or through people from the other side. Now, one of them is, well, why did the previous NC take so long? They wasted 15 months or whatever. One of their representatives was on that NC, just like they were representatives from the other main stakeholders. They're well aware of what the delays were. And so the less I go into them on a public forum, probably the better. But they're well aware of what those delays were. And part of those delays were caused by the fact that there were these political parties that were all in there and discussing things. So that's one. The second thing that I keep hearing is that we want representation. Well, FIFA gave representation like any other country in the world. FIFA said, who are the main stakeholders? Let's form a committee of all the main stakeholders. Let's move these things forward and get them sorted out. Well, the main stakeholders came together. They spent 15 months and they got nowhere. They didn't even get through the first step, which is club registration or club scrutiny, and elections were nowhere in sight. So eventually, Hamza resigned and FIFA stepped in and said, we need to reset because this is not working. So this time around, FIFA brought in an independent body. And so, yes, there is no representation, but there's no representation because we've tried that and it failed. And so therefore, there is no representation this time. The third thing, and this is, again, mind-boggling to me, the third thing they're asking for is free and fair elections and an election roadmap. Well, we'd already announced that the election roadmap would be available in the first week of April. This was in our press conference in March 10, 12, whenever it was. And so they took over a couple of days before the election roadmap was actually to be announced. And so, yeah, free and fair elections, FIFA's already said that. That's what it's all about. The fourth thing, and I think this is really telling, is they're saying FIFA needs to come to the table and AFC needs to come to the table and give us an assurance that elections will happen on time. This is what their fourth thing that I keep hearing is. Well, FIFA isn't coming to the table. In Pakistan, the Normalisation Committee represents FIFA, and we're already in conversation. What they're saying is that FIFA and AFC should come here to Pakistan and negotiate with us. And it boggles my mind that somebody would think that would happen.
In fact, sir, I think, I mean, this is mind-boggling as it is, but I've also heard some voice notes which sort of celebrated the fact that we have kicked out FIFA. So there's a lot of mind-boggling discussions going on. This is the least of it, unfortunately. On this, though, yeah, sorry, go on.
But here's something very interesting. In 2018, when they were so-called elected, FIFA never recognized them. Even in September 2019, when the Normalization Committee was formed and they said FIFA asked us to hand it over, FIFA never asked them. FIFA wrote a letter to the chairman, Hamza Khan, saying, this is now the new Normalization Committee, and kindly take over charge from the people currently occupying the premises. So this was the FIFA communication in September 2019. This gentleman, Ashfaq Shah, says, I've written 9 letters and it's all on record. But those 9 letters have never been responded to because FIFA doesn't recognize them as a legal body. I think the third really thing to note is that even for the suspension order, FIFA wrote to their normalization committee and said it will be suspended. And when it was suspended, the letter was sent to the chairman of the normalization committee to say, kindly inform that it has been suspended. And now when the next step, Khuda na khasta, happens, it will come again to the chairman of the normalization committee to say it's now been banned. And so if someone's holding out to say कि FIFA आके हमसे बात करे, I'm the only FIFA, the Normalization Committee is the only FIFA representative in the country. So we're already here. Talk to us. लेकिन FIFA के घुटने टेक देंगे, that's not going to happen. It's the European Super League should tell you that.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that people think that actually tells you the world that some people are living in. So, just moving on this, you obviously talked about their demands and what they want. Do you think that the NC and or FIFA could have handled things a bit differently? I don't just mean right now after the event. I mean before that, during the duration that they say they've been, aggrieved.
Yeah. There's a few important things to note here. So first of all, when did all of this start? So all of this started in 2015 and actually 2011, but 2015 is when things finally boiled over, and then the Supreme Court appointed a caretaker for the PFF for 3 years, and then somebody went to court again, and then an election happened, and Pakistan got suspended in the meanwhile, and then eventually FIFA appointed a normalization committee in 2019. If we're hell-bent on ruining things for ourselves, FIFA can only try to make things better. And what I mean by that is for 72 years, FIFA has been supporting Pakistan. Pakistan Football Federation, Pakistan Football earns no money. Everything that is done is based on FIFA money, for funding that comes. Even premises that these people are occupying and saying FIFA doesn't matter is FIFA House that was built on FIFA money. And so they constantly support Pakistan, and they've been doing it for 72 years. Should FIFA come in and take over Pakistan and run? FIFA has other things to do. We're 201, we don't rank anywhere. So FIFA did the reasonable thing. In September 2019, they got all the main stakeholders and said, give us a representative each, and we'll put them in a normalization committee and they will resolve matters for the country. Well, that experiment failed. Could it have been less than 15 months? Yes, it could have, but I think it was reasonable for FIFA to give extra time because of the COVID situation that everyone was facing and the whole world was going through it. Eventually, FIFA decided that the normalization committee needs to be reset, and so they appointed a new normalization committee. It's the same mandate: run day-to-day operations, club registration, club scrutiny, district election, provincial election, federal election handover. That's exactly what we're doing. So we took charge on the 20th of January 2021. And this happened on the 27th of March. That's a 2 month period. Within those 2 months, on day to day operations, we had the National Women's Championship running. We confirmed participation in a number of international events, and we'd confirmed the calendar for the year. And we'd confirmed that the election schedule or roadmap would be announced in the first week of April, and that it would be a public document available to everybody. We had gotten FIFA Connect ID. That means every single player in Pakistan would receive a FIFA number, a FIFA ID, and that's a really big deal. So all of these things we did within a period of 2 months. Money was going back to footballers and sporting activities. And so, yeah, I think everything that we did was super fast. All of these people were spoken with. All their representatives came. Ashfaq Shah came, met me. I told him everything that was happening. And, yet I guess we somehow don't want things to function. Yeah, it's interesting.
I mean, what more can you say? But generally, apart from this entire situation, which is a disaster for everyone, I just wanted to ask you what your um, plans were as part, like as an NC chairman for Pakistani football as a whole. So if this whole thing hadn't come about, what were you looking towards in the future as NC chairman?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. So there's three key responsibilities that we have as a normalization committee. One is the day-to-day operations. One is, of course, conducting elections, and one is, of course, the handover process. In those day-to-day operations, the idea is to have an active calendar because FIFA knows that without football, there's no federation. There's no point of having a federation. Football is for the players and it's for the fans. That's really what it's all about. So the idea was to announce a calendar for the year, which we did. The National Women's Championship was ongoing. We confirmed our participation in SAF. There was money coming back into the sector, and there was money getting to players, coaches, referees, clubs, and that's key. The second thing was the elections. We were announcing the election roadmap in the first week of April, but we'd already announced the FIFA Connect ID platform. We'd already done a test pilot with the referees to register them on Google Forms. And so there were lots of steps towards the elections that had already been completed as well. And so we were fairly confident that in short order, elections could happen. And then the third important thing was the handover process. So we wanted to hand over the PFF in a way that whatever new elected body came in would already be set up for success. And what that means is that not only do they have a sporting calendar, not only do they have the financial wherewithal, but they have a fit for purpose organization that can allow the new incoming body to execute on the plans, as well as giving a roadmap, which then the new body can adjust as they come in. And this is what we were calling PFF 2.0, which is the reset. So, so there's so much to do, Ismail. There's so many things to do. There's our footballers, our players, our people deserve so much better, and that's exactly the path that we were on.
Yeah, absolutely. So I talked to Umaid Wasim about this whole situation right after it happened. And one of the things he mentioned, because he's been covering the political situation with regards to Pakistani football for a while now, he said that there was sort of an inkling within FIFA that, or there should have been an inkling within FIFA that the statutes of the Pakistani football, the PFF constitution, had to be either reviewed or tweaked, so that proper elections could take place, so that once the normalization committee conducted those elections and handed PFF's charge over to someone, the same problems wouldn't arise again. So, do you think that was also something that was being deliberated, or
Yeah,
something to that effect?
yeah, and much respect to Umaid because he's always point on. So that's very astute. Yes, the entire statutes, not just the portion that covers election, but the entire statutes need a review. And FIFA had already asked the Pakistan Football Federation to do those in the past. The thinking again was that when the newly elected Congress comes in, the newly elected Congress, one of the first tasks that will be assigned to them will be a review of the statutes, and that's kind of how it had been foreseen to roll out. We, as a normalization committee, even though we're the EC, we're not interested uh, or we were not mandated with changing the constitution because that was to be left for the incoming Congress. So I think that's an astute observation. There are some flaws in the statutes and they do need to be rectified, of
Right,
course.
right. And on a general level, aside from your responsibilities and role as the NC chairman, you're also a Pakistani football fan. What do you think are the main problems with the football that we have on a general level? If you remove yourself from the administrative scope, and how can they be solved? Do you think?
Yeah, I think the problems are many and varied. But of course, there has to be a way to solve them, and that's something that I think is imminently doable. There are, I think, a number of different areas that need to be looked at. So first and foremost is our 201 ranking. Our 201 ranking is not a reflection of the caliber of our players. It's a reflection of the administrative issues. Many people believe that the only way to improve the ranking is by playing international games and international match points. Yes, that's a primary way, but the number of official coaches that you have, the number of coaches that have conducted A, B, or C licensing, the number of referees that you have, the trainings that you roll out, the number of clubs, academies, a thriving ecosystem, all of those also contribute to your ranking scores. And so I think these are some basic issues at the administrative level that could easily take us to 140 within the next 5 years. And I think that's something that the PFF should be looking at very actively. The second important thing, I think, is that there needs to be a greater visibility to football, but also to the players domestically. So we need to create heroes out of local players. And through the FCPK platform, you know that that's something that we've actively been doing, and that's the only thing that the FCPK platform does. And the third, I think the key thing is that money going to the sector. That money could be in the form of partnerships, it could be in the form of sponsorships, it could be in the form of media rights, it could be in the form of infrastructure, and it can be in the form of leagues and competitions. I think once that money starts to flow into the sector and starts to trickle down to the players, the coaches, and the referees, is when we'll start to see a more active development side to the game where more people are willing to come into football. And I think that's absolutely key. So we need to sort out some administrative issues. We need to and improve our ranking.
Yeah, yeah, and so it's very interesting what you said about the last point about how we need to have money coming into the sector, and you said that's going to fuel development and that's going to incentivize more people to actually, put their heart and soul into it because right now, and I've talked to a lot of footballers who belong to underprivileged backgrounds, there is a family pressure of them their families telling them to skip football and get out of it because the payoff is not there. They've seen generations of people who have gone into it and who have their sort of lives wasted because of the very low ceiling that's there, either financially or career wise. So isn't it like sort of a chicken and egg problem in the sense that the money, I think, might only start coming in once the sort of companies or the people who are going to put in money sort of see that there's potential there, that there's football activity going on, and that's going to have sort of a cyclical effect of creating even more opportunities and more development and so on.
Yeah, I think to a degree that's right. And of course, success builds upon success, for sure. Um, what we should take into account, though, is that FIFA provides us that seed money. FIFA provides that seed money to kickstart the game in the country. So that is absolutely available. And a clear example of that is the National Women's Football Championship that we were just experiencing. Even though it's the highest ever club support that has been announced, even though it was the largest ever purse pool that was announced, but it's still not enough. We can do so much more, and we have the funds available. We have the resources available to spend on the men's game, to spend on the women's game, to spend on youth game. So it's not as if there's a dearth of funds to get it started. We have money available, and perhaps because I'm appointed by FIFA, I have greater freedom to spend, but even otherwise, as a football federation, there is enough money that FIFA provides to kickstart activities and to build upon those successes. And there's commercial models available throughout the world that allow these things to happen. But here's where it breaks down again. Unless the federation is not sorted out, unless
Yeah.
club licensing rules are not clear, unless solidarity payments are not clear, unless transfer mechanisms are not clear, unless the rules of the game are not established, unless there's a strong referee community, a licensed coaching community. These are imperatives to get football active in the country. They're key pillars of development. And if we don't focus on them, which we haven't in the last 72 years, then it reflects where football is today.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Sir, on an ending note, is this sort of the crossroads with regards to the Pakistan Football Federation Normalisation Committee? Do you have a hopeful message for Pakistani football fans, or are we looking at a 5-year ban?
Yeah, it's, I've always grown up um, looking ahead to the future. What I see today is an amazing love and passion for the game within the country. And I see it increasing year over year over year because I've been looking at it for years. I see amazing individuals, both as players, as fans of the sport, active in the community. And I see talent all around Pakistan when I look. So I think the sport, the beautiful game will continue to survive. The question is, can we really start building on it and taking it to the next level? I think FIFA has provided a very clear mechanism. Um, all that needs to be done is for these 10, 12 people that are currently holding the country hostage, they need to be removed. The NC needs to take charge back. Thereby extension, FIFA needs to take charge back. And then very soon we can be back on track. So I'm always hopeful for the future. I'm boggled by the actions that some people take, but I'm always hopeful for the future. And I hope that things will continue to get better.
Yeah, yeah. Like we can all hope and pray for the same. Is there sort of the last thing that I wanted to ask before I let you go? Is there sort of a date after which FIFA is going to be like, okay, enough is enough. Now we're turning this suspension into a ban. And do we have any hope of sort of getting back the normalization committee before that deadline?
Yeah, so FIFA acts at its own pace, and its own pace is quick. So as you'll notice that when this whole takeover piece happened, FIFA sent a letter, provided a deadline, said you need to move by then or suspension will happen. And so suspension happened on the day that they said it would. Right now, we're trying as a normalization committee our very best to say that things will resolve. We are talking, we are trying to put pressure, whether moral, ethical, whatever it may be, to say, please, let's move football forward. So I will continue to push to delay it as far as possible. But I think there will come a point where FIFA will say, the government doesn't seem to be doing anything about it. These people don't seem to be being vacated. We're the ones that are giving money, and we're the ones that are going through this pain. Why should we bother? And then they'll quickly ban, and then they'll be gone for 5 years. When they go for 5 years, at the end of 5 years, they will most likely send in a fact-finding mission. So effectively, for the next 6 to 8 years, you're looking at no football in the country, no funding coming in, no Pakistan teams going out, then that fact-finding mission will probably suggest the appointment of another NC and another election process. So we're looking at 7 or 8 years before things start. We can do this today, or we can do it 8 years later.
Or we can continue doing this forever.
Ever.
If the people who
Yeah.
are sort of who think they have the power or should have the power keep acting like this. Sir, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking out the time. I hope and pray on behalf of everyone who's a supporter and fan of Pakistani football, be that players, coaches, referees, or just plain old football supporters, that this situation gets resolved, that you are able to complete your mandate, that you are able to do all the great things that you want to do for Pakistani football. May God save Pakistan football. This has been Pressing Matters. Take it easy.